might be a problem because when they're on film, over time, I mean, they passed away, and my father died in 2010, my mother in 2008. So it was a long time afterwards that I began editing. Now I'm 23. And watching the same footage again and again, it's sometimes it's a bit odd because my memory of them gets reduced to what's on film, the images.
Sure.
Yeah, so maybe if I didn't have them on film, I'd remember many more things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of repetition.
You say towards the beginning of the film that you finally started filming them, but you had been reticent to film them before, and I'm interested in why you had been reticent before.
Oh, just awkwardness, awkward talking to your own parents and changing roles. Yeah, but then as they got older, I decided I should film because then I'll lose them altogether.
Right, right. But they knew you as a filmmaker, but they hadn't known that you in that way. Like were they around while you were filming before?
Yeah, they've seen me filming for. I've been making films almost for 50 years.
Right,
now.
right.
And so yes, and they've always been supportive.
Yeah.
And my father especially would sit in on the edit process of many of my films.
So you decided at this point, they were getting older, you wanted to make sure did you have an idea of what you wanted to capture?
No, for a long time, not at all. I was just keeping the memory for myself. And then once I started doing interviews, because I was otherwise filming them in the park or filming them in birthdays and anniversaries and that sort of stuff. But once I started talking to them, and then I started talking to my uncle as well, my father's younger brother, who lived a few years later after my father passed as well.
Okay.
So some of the interview was done after my parents had gone, but I was going back to my uncle, who was still of that generation,
right.
The only one still alive. And by this time I sort of knew that I was trying to do oral history, because I was getting oral history from them.
Right.
And then especially while editing, I realized that this oral history would be important to the whole country, because India is rewriting its history, and much of this is lost.
Right.
Much of this is lost, and at least the emotional quality of what existed before and the aspirations of people, that is now being retold in a completely different way. And we have a right-wing Hindu fundamentalist government in power, and they are consciously rewriting the story, especially about the fact that they killed Mahatma Gandhi because they perceived him as, anti-caste and anti-untouchability and pro-Muslim. They perceived him as being partial to Muslims, and also because they're appealing to Hindu majority, and Gandhi also appealed to the same, the same community, not only to the Hindu majority, but Gandhi had appealed, and Gandhi's version of Hinduism was totally different from theirs. So I think killing Gandhi was important for them to get rid of the rival to this story.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about that, the reasons for making it now and how it feels resonant to now. But I'm just curious about some of those interviews that you do outside, beyond your parents.
Yeah.
Did that come from talking to your parents and realizing, oh, okay, I'm going to go catch up with other people, or these are all people you had heard their stories before, you just wanted to make sure you had that all on camera?
So a little bit was accidental, because like my father's good friend visited after he had passed, so I got that interview from him. The person who tells us about the underground days when he was assisting my uncle, and he was told to learn how to drive. So from him I got bits and pieces about, because my uncle actually never talked about the freedom struggle. I mean, I wasn't, with my eldest uncle passed away, I was just 19. So I wrote a poem with Den, which after he passed, which I used in the film.
Yeah.
But my his younger brother, Achyut, who was the underground leader, passed away in 1930. He passed away when he was 88, and it was, by that time I was 32 years old. I'd already made a few films.
Yeah.
So I was already a filmmaker, but I should have started filming him. But because he didn't want to talk about the freedom struggles in particular, and that's the story I wanted to hear.
Sure.
So I never filmed, and I regret that I didn't force him to talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because those stories are lost. Because they were amazing stories about the underground days, which nobody has because he never told that story. So bits and pieces you can get from people now. Very few people are alive who knew him, but from them I got little bits of the story.
Okay. I love your approach to doing the oral history. Like it seems like everyone is in a comfortable space, almost as if you've caught them in the middle of doing something else and they start telling the story. I'm interested in your strategy for getting that.
Not strategy. It was actually what I would. I didn't know I was making a film, as I said. So it wasn't strategy. I wasn't positioning people to do this, but as I was filming them and talking about something else, bits and pieces came out.
Yeah.
And then after I got the bulk of the filming, I'd already started editing. Then I found some other people who would tell parts of the story, like the person who is now almost 100 years old, who's still alive, who goes to that rally, who witnessed the beginning of the 1942 movement in that large meeting where Gandhi said, "Do or die." And so I got his interview later on, and he came to this last screening that I did in Mumbai.
Oh, wow.
And now he's 100 years old now. Yeah.
Incredible. So I'm interested then, at some point it started, when did you start thinking that maybe this was a film? Because we see like 10 years of footage here, I believe. 2000 used to begin?
You actually, the earliest footage that's in the film is probably the late 80s. So it's like 30 years.
Right. But when you
because
start the film,
my mother filmed, because my mother filmed my uncle in Chennai who's living alone and feeding the cat.
Okay.
So that's shot on her VHS camera.
Amazing. But I'm curious about when it became a film for you, and because this is a long stretch.
So pretty late, because I made Reason, the film that was shown at IDFA in 2018, and then I spent a few years showing that film around before I started getting back into it. And then there was a pandemic, so it was actually during the pandemic when I was stuck at home that I looked at the home movie footage more seriously and started editing.
Okay. So before then, this had just been home movie footage.
Yeah.
In no shape whatsoever.
Hundreds of mini DV tapes. And,
Yeah.
and some even high 8 tapes.
And then within that, you're spending this time looking at this old footage, this notion of it's vital to today's moment, and so it became a little bit more. Is there more history in this than there would have been?
To some extent, yes, because of what's happening today in the country. And then I brought in other things, like I jumped back and forth in the film quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I jumped quite irrationally into 2019, where my parents have already passed, and it's 9 years after my father passed. But in 2019, there was this huge rally of Hindus and Muslims and the general community fighting against the Citizenship Amendment Bill, by which the new government is trying to downgrade the citizenship of Muslims by specific, and people might not understand how they're doing it, but they actually brought in a bill by which Hindus who reside outside India but feel like coming back to India will get their citizenship. But if they happen to be Muslims, they won't be able to do that. So which is completely against the Constitution, which treats everybody as equal.
Right.
but this is a way of bringing in amendments to rewrite the Constitution even.
And what's interesting about that this is really not ancient history. Like your parents were with us not that long ago, and they lived through the events of 60 years prior, say, and yet we're dealing with this like amnesia of exactly what happened. And how are they achieving, or how is that being achieved in terms of denying history?
So they haven't been able to eradicate Mahatma Gandhi from the public memory, or people from village levels, working class to across the board still have a very positive view of Gandhi, but they have done a huge number on denouncing him and through their WhatsApp fake news stuff, stories that circulate which are completely fake about Gandhi. Like Gandhi is seen as a betrayer of the country. The guy who killed Gandhi actually wrote a whole. Not wrote. He was tried in the trial soon after the murder. The guy who pulled the trigger was, in fact, a whole group. It was a whole plot of upper caste Hindus who killed Gandhi. But 2 people were hanged for it, and the main guy who pulled the trigger. In court, he talked about why he killed Gandhi. He took the opportunity of court to put his ideology out, and that book is very popular now. It's sold even at the railway station, the airports, and everything, because that is the new India that exists, where the killer of Gandhi is being celebrated in some section of society, but the government plays a double game. They let this happen and encourage it. At the same time, they can't. When Modi goes abroad, he'll put a garland on Gandhi statues because Gandhi is popular even internationally, and he wants to claim Gandhi. So they have Gandhi portraits. They have Ambedkar, who wrote the Indian Constitution, the one main draftsman who came from the untouchable community, so-called. But in fact, at Gandhi's insistence, he was given the task of being the main draftsperson of the Constitution of India, and he became India's first law minister. So the new right wing doesn't like him, but like Gandhi, they have his portraits everywhere, and they try to claim him visually, but without reminding people what they believed in.
Right. And these events are also not taught anymore. It seems like you have those interactions with students who seem to not even be aware of
and the student thought that Gandhi divided India, because that is the canard that spread, that Gandhi divided India because Gandhi loved Muslims and he gave Pakistan. And that is what Godse, the killer, actually said in court as well, that he killed Gandhi because otherwise Gandhi was emasculating Hindu society,
right.
And Gandhi was, appeasing the Muslims, which is what their main story against the Congress Party is also as a whole.
Right. There's I think it's the 2003 footage maybe where we see that graffiti from the right wing. And I'm interested in where we are in history there in terms of. Is that the beginning of that arc that you're living through right now? When did that begin in terms of
No, it's much older than that. It's, in fact, if you watch my other films, they're like a documentation of the rise of fundamentalism.
Right.
Not just Hindu fundamentalism, mainly Hindu fundamentalism, but I made a film about the rise of the Sikh separatists as well. And so I think I would say it's from the mid-1980s that there was a resurgence of religious identity. And it coincides with, Yugoslavia broke up and became separate religious states in a sense, attacks in Bosnia on the Muslim community, and it coincides with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the idea of socialism, the idea that there can be a different glue to bring people together than the religious glue.
I'm interested in the film playing now, and the reception you may have gotten for this film in the current context. What has
In
the
India,
response
you
been?
mean?
Yeah, what's the response been?
So in India, I've only had 3 screenings publicly.
Yeah.
At film festivals, two film festivals which I, so I had 2 screenings in Mumbai and 1 in Dharamshala,
Okay.
where the Dalai Lama lives,
Mm-hmm.
and because they have a Dharamshala Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So the reception was very good, but it's a self-selected audience. I mean, it goes to
Right,
film
of course,
festivals, and in the film festival comes to see my films. so it's hard to generalize.
But it does seem
But
like,
it's
yeah.
I think that if I can get the Indian audience into the cinema and watch, they will respond positively. But the real problem is that nowadays the right wing makes sure that their cadre doesn't go to see these films.
Right.
Earlier they used to demonize me and even do demonstrations or heckle in the cinema and ask difficult questions. But they started losing some of their people. People who actually watch the film would, think things afresh.
Right.
And now they don't want to take that risk, so they just badmouth me but making sure that people don't watch the
Don't
films.
even go at all.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I hope that doesn't happen here.
Yeah. So, but I think the middle ground I could reach. I
Right.
will be able to reach. Yeah.
Right. Do you want to see if they have a question at all?
Sure.
Yeah, I know it's sort of going against the rules, but go ahead.
The scene of the Pakistani and the Indian friendships.
Yeah.
I mean, that was very intense. They were very positive. How is that movement growing at the moment, or is that movement still there?
The movement is still there, but it's not as vibrant as it was. It's not encouraged by either government. So these were people-to-people exchanges that we tried to do since late 90s. I first went to Pakistan after India and Pakistan did nuclear tests, and I made a film against nuclear. I mean, you saw a reference to that in this film, and I meet my family friend who says that I'm making an anti-nuclear film. We did these exchanges on a people-to-people basis. Sometimes the Pakistanis would come to India and sometimes we would go there. And they were amazing because ordinary people are really welcoming. When I was in Pakistan, a taxi driver wouldn't take money from me if they knew that I was from India. So it's the governments that have set people apart. And don't forget that the partition was done in a very brutal way. Overnight, almost, the British drew a line, divided villages in half, divided families in half. So many people have relatives in the other country whom they've not been able to see.
Thank you for the film. Touching film. I was just wondering, just in the current context of where we are now and the major conflict that's going on at the moment, India voted